Hello, guys. Let's paint some textures today. Yeah, yesterday I posted an image of my progress, including some of the changes I did during class yesterday. I don't know if you noticed, like the little black heads and things like that. I incorporated to the nose. So that's the latest displacement, which is right here, right? So a lot of those things I ended up like showing you guys yesterday during class. So you can see the black heads in there. I can actually add a little color in each one of them so they look a little nicer, right? Those little guys right there. And then some of that additional direction that I added to the pores and all this stuff, yeah, it's like it's slowly doing more and more renders. You start seeing what's wrong with it, and you start like refining your eye. It's like I'm looking at some references and stuff. Obviously, for the model itself, I don't have a lot of reference, right? I could just have like one angle for that guy, and then what I'm using in terms of reference for form is not a lot, but like for coloring, then I'm using like a bunch of those references I'm looking at. Those the skin tone for those guys right here. So very different shades, right? Like at first I thought about going like really dark. Like this guy looks awesome. But then I thought like maybe I can keep a little bit more like, I would say like this guy here, which would be like an interesting compromise. It's like a not super, super dark, right? His lips are way darker than my guy though. So it's just like trying to figure out what works best. It's like I look at this guy here as well, like in terms of tone, but his lips, like when I added like the too pink like this, it looked a little strange for my character, so I removed. So both of his lips are more like in that kind of shade. But I like the variations in here. It's like how you get those brownish tones, and then you get like some dark spots normally around the forehead. So let's see, there's another one I was looking before. Yeah, I noticed a couple of like darker tones, obviously. In the stubble area, I had to actually incorporate some more darks in there. And then the corners of around the nose, I added some more dark as well. Around the eyes, definitely more dark. And then in my case here, I added some more dark around the forehead as well. The trick today is going to be how to demonstrate the it's like the painting of the colors and everything with such dark skin tone. So especially like, you look from the side like that, right? Like it's very, very dark. But I thought about, it's like maybe it's starting with white skin, right? And then shifting towards this. But I can do maybe like both. I can actually show you guys how I have, like with the lighter skin, how I got to something similar to this. And also I can actually do some color boosting in my ZBrush. And I can show you how to start, if you want to start from scratch, something like this, in a way you can still see it. You kind of have to crank the shader a little bit. So for example, like if I look at my ZBrush right now, my startup material, I actually reduced a lot of the ambient. So actually I can get this dark tone and get a lot of the specularity. So I can actually read and see how it's going to look in the renders, right? Like basically like a way to measure if it needs more shininess in certain areas like the nose and lips, and then remove things. But now when I switch back my color, you cannot see anything, right? It's way too dark. So if I shift this back to basically going to material and then modifiers, you're going to notice that I have my diffuse color and the ambient color. So the ambient color is only 14. If I keep cranking it, you kind of start seeing some more of the coloring in there, right? But this is just like a shader thing, right? As soon as you bring back to a normal shader, it's going to go very, very dark. So I'm going to try to do both. I'm going to import like maybe a node mesh just to extract the color from it. And then also use this one here and then show you like what's the average color that I found for that type of skin. As a ballpark, obviously, your character is going to be completely custom, right? But so if I switch material here to, let's say, skin shade, right? Like, so the skin shader It's not like super dark. It's kind of like a little bit like what I see in Maya, just not with the same reflection, obviously, but I can actually go in here and maybe like incorporate a little bit more spec to it, right? Just like to kind of simulate a little bit the skin I'm seeing, but still pretty dark for you guys over there. So I can also do this, just go to the diffuse, crank it, go to the ambient and crank it. And now I can actually see the skin, right? So basically like, this is the reverse of what I had to do with the bottle I started. Basically, I started with the skin from Stan Winston. You're probably gonna see a couple of little veins and things like that in there. I think it was Stan Winston. I'm not sure if that was him, but I think it was. And then everything else was basically like painted on top of it. So basically, like I added some more darks around the eyes, right? Like I repainted the lips, the side of the face, and added more darkness in there under the neck as well, like under the chin. But the paint I'm doing here is very, very basic. Like all those renders you saw in there, basically what's driving the renders to look like this is basically the displacement map, right? Which is breaking up all and adding more detail than it actually has. For example, like in ZBrush here, I didn't paint anything in HD yet. All this stuff was painted outside of HD at 1 million polygons. So everything is a little bit simple. You know, there's some variation in there, some darkness in there, but it's not like super high res at all. So the first thing I'm gonna do, let's just open like one of those old files. Let's start with Stan Winston one, so we can actually explore it, and just like so we can steal. Let's see if I have a copy here. Maybe I have a copy. Yeah, this one has a copy. Cool, even easier. Let's see, is it correct? I don't know. Let's see if the material. If I go back to the diffuse, yeah, that's not gonna. Let me see, 80. Yeah, that's already darker. I got hopeful because it looked a little lighter because I was cranking the shader quite a lot. So yeah, let's go with the plan here. Let's open an old file, like one of those Stan Winston ones. So personal projects, Stan Winston. Let's get ZBrush, and then let's say combine, blah blah. This one, HD. And then meanwhile, I'm going to show you this. So this is the color. This is basically the map that's being exported from ZBrush, right? It looks very, very simple, as you can tell. There's not a lot of detail in there. Some of the noise in here, it was from the high resolution when I started from it, but it's not translated into the lowest resolution. So it's a, you know, a pretty basic map. In terms of color average in here, if you want to take note, if you're doing like a darker skin, I don't know, like maybe as a ballpark, it can help you guys. So you can try this. So if I go right here, this neutral area, and I pick, let's see, like this area here, this is basically what I have for RGB is like 57, 37, 25. So again, 57, 37, 25. If I go a little bit closer to the darker areas in here, it's gonna go as far as 35, 22, 12 around here. And then I have like some lighter areas, like the tip of the nose in here, which I have like 70, 46, and 29, kind of like a ballpark, right? So cheeks in here, same kind of 60, 38, 54, right? So if I go, there is always like a way to do like an average of it. Like if I just, for example, let's try something very stupid here. Let's get like an average of this whole area right here. So let's do a copy. So image duplicate, and this guy here, I'm gonna just crop it. So edit, and then actually is it image crop. So that's a crop in there. So there is a, let's see if we can find it here, filter, blur, average, right? So this is the average color in here of all those colors. So this chunk here gives me like, it's pretty easy to memorize, 50, 30, and 28, and 18, basically 50, 30, 18. So we could potentially use this to start the coloring from this color, and then basically like go up and down like darkers and lighter tones, some more shifted towards yellow and orange, some more shifted towards magenta, very desaturated purples, you know, around the lips and stuff like that. We're going to be talking about that. But this is kind of like a ballpark if you average that whole forehead part, the side of the face, and then a little bit of this darker tones. So that's kind of the average right there, 50, 30, and 18. So let's take a look here. So now I have this very weird guy smiling there. Without the beard, looks even creepier, right? And then, so let's get this, let's see, if I duplicate it, and then I'm gonna just delete this, and I'm gonna try to delete, actually I can just import it in here. So append from the first one, so append this guy. I'm gonna save this, let's see, export, no, let's do like a save as, and then I'm gonna do African ZBrush and temp one, and let's reload our file there. I have to go back to those old models, man. There's so many problems I see I can you know, fix. And I always had this idea about like fixing all those models, you know, it's like doing an additional pass, improve the likeness, and have a little gallery, you know, like with them posed, and instead of like just like looking forward and stuff. But everything is basically unfinished, right? I just have to move on and start a new class, and I never have, you know, time to actually go back to those models, but it's part of the plan eventually. So let's go to here. Let's do a load. So let's load that model here, stand temp. And then now we can actually grab it here. So let's do an append. And then, where is it? Oops. Where did I load it? Did I load it here? Oh, yeah, okay. It came with the star in there for some reason. Okay, let's delete it. And then that guy, okay, let's append it right at the end. And then let's do something here. Let's go all the way down. Oh, come on, ZBrush. Man, it's crashing like it's the second time in the last 2 days. Like third time, right? One with you guys, one with me the other day. Huh, I'm not liking that. Not liking it. No, ZBrush, thank you. Yeah, man, like ZBrush 2019 rarely ever crashed for me. This 2020 seems like a little bit, at least on my computer. That's the thing, like every computer is gonna be a little different. But for my computer, it's like, it's more unstable for sure. Just a second, let me try to open this. Yeah, I hate those crashes, man. And I can see them coming when you start working with XGen, because at least like all versions of mine so far had crashed at some point with XGen. And we are version 2020 now. And I'm pretty sure 2020 has some bugs as well, because I heard about it. I was reading about it on the interwebs. And I'm pretty sure there's something funky happening in there too. So let's see, let's delete this. And then let's append this guy back here. Let's see if it appends without crashing. Or if my scene is getting too complicated, which I don't think it is. So this guy here is probably like out of place. He's had all the way up there. But in terms of poly count and topology is the same. So I'm just gonna go like a couple of subdivision levels lower in here, 69. And I'm just gonna import the latest one I exported. Actually, let's do it better. Let's get the most precise one here, which is like the latest head. That right there. Let's export as 1.1 million. Shouldn't take too long. High res 27. Let's see, margin, blah, blah, blah. I believe the topology is exactly the same, so we should get the UVs from this guy here as well, so it's going to be a good way to do it. And then obviously going to delete anything I don't need anymore, so my computer is not lacking memory, which I highly doubt, right? I have like 82 gigs of free memory right there, so I don't think that's going to be the problem. But okay, so that's exported. So let's delete this guy here first. I don't need that subtool anymore. Back here, let's go to the last subtool, which is that out of place guy. Highest resolution 1.1 million. Let's import the mesh we just exported. Should pop right in place. Let's see. Okay, and we should get his skin, right? So he has like Stan's skin. So let's do this. I'm gonna save this file before it crashes again because you never know. So now we have this guy, and then we have this guy here with the darker skin. So we have both. So I can show you guys how to approach both ways. File save as ZBrush 13. Just make sure you have this saved. It's kind of interesting if I do a render with like a pale skin, you know. It'd be interesting to actually test like some vitiligo stuff. If I can blend both maps, you know, do some vitiligo, just for the sake of it, just for fun, right? Because it's not going to be part of my character at all. But just to do that, kind of, it's so fascinating the way that skin just fades into another color. All right, let's see. All right, good. So now I have like the skin from Stan, which like if I switch to flat coloring here, you can see it's very pale, right? And then there's a lot of you know, pinching happening in there because of the thickness of the lips is very different here. But you see, like even in this model here, I hope you guys can see with all the crappy compression, things gonna get a little worse once it's recorded. And I swear I tried to find the settings of better resolution, better, you know, color compression thing and settings, and never could find anything better from Zoom. But I can actually post like maybe some screenshots so you guys can see what I'm talking about. But around the underneath the eyebrows in here, I normally get a little bit more of like a pale color, right? And then this pale color is going to propagate a little bit around like areas with cartilage. So like, you know, it's like this area here in the nose, I could actually bring up a little bit more. The ears as well, right? And also this little halo around the lips. So like this whole frame of the lips is normally a little bit lighter as well, but not as yellow as this. So this is kind of like a pale yellow, almost whitish color. But because you have to think about like what's underneath the skin, right? You're gonna have like fat deposits and things like that. So I try to go a little, normally not pure white, but almost pure white with a little tint of yellow. And then there are some other colors I incorporate, like greens around here, you know, it's like the corners. And then there's some purples as well incorporated in here. When you mix all those colors, you start getting some other tones, but it's kind of like everything is painted with very thin layers of color, always like with a very low intensity, just built on top of each other, right? So let's say you started with something like this and you decide, okay, I'm gonna try the same approach that Chris had, because that way, if I paint like a pale skin, I can actually use for other characters with the same topology, which is basically what I'm doing, right? Use the same topology. Every time is a brand new sculpture, but every time is the same topology. So I can actually just reuse some maps. The albedo, I try to paint a brand new one every time. But when it comes like to specular maps and, you know, bump height and all this stuff, you can reuse a lot of stuff if you already have them. So that's the whole purpose of, you know, building a topology you can actually reuse, right? So that's what I try to do. That's why I kind of go faster than you guys are doing, especially if you're starting from scratch, right? It's because I already have stuff built. but at the same time, I don't want to bypass any step. At least like show you how what the maps look like, so you have like a visual reference, and what type of brushes I use to create those maps, and do some demo every time. Even if I'm not painting everything from scratch, at least give you a good notion of what's needed. And then for the albedo, we're gonna try to paint everything from scratch, but since I already have that other version that I'm quite happy with, I'm probably gonna, keep going with that one, but maybe have like this one in parallel and maybe show a comparison or something. So you have a color like this, and you decide, okay, I'm gonna paint everything pale, and so I'm gonna have to shift now to a darker color. So ZBrush now, since the last version, has, if you go to your poly paint, you're gonna see there's a bunch of different controls in here now, and one of them says adjust colors, right? So basically what I did was to tweak 2 different slides in here, not more than that. So basically like the gamma, right? You can bring it down, but you're gonna see like if you go up, it desaturates. If you go down, it saturates the color. It gets very, very red, right? So to counter that, you can use the HSV intensity. So this one really goes down without saturating. But now sometimes you want to saturate a little bit. So maybe you can bring this one down and then this one up. You kind of like find a happy balance between the 2 of them, which is not like, it's saturated enough, but not overly saturated if you go down too fast without playing with this one, right? So if I keep this one at 0 and I just play with this, it goes red, right? But if I do a compensation by going up again and then down with this guy here, now I start to get like a nicer tone, right? So let's get this one bigger here so you can see it. It looks like that, right? So basically like for free, I would get like some stuff, like some of this pale area around the eyes in there, right? And then some darker around the eye bags. And so from here, basically, like I had to find like a sweet spot by looking at references and get something, let's say probably around here, and then do a render. And then in the render would look like, okay, it's not saturated enough. It can have more color saturation. So I would do another pass, come back here, and then crank a little bit more of this guy here. You can go the reverse, right? Just go up again, and then go down with this one. So you can keep adjusting just those 2 slides until you get something that in average, it's like it works for that character. So you're gonna see like a tone that's not perfect because you're gonna need more variations in certain areas. Maybe the lip's gonna have to reverse and go lighter instead of darker, right? But that's basically what you do. So if you press OK, all of a sudden your model now has a darker tone, right? It basically like everything was shifted down. So this is very useful. I probably went even darker than this using the same control. At any time, you just go back. So adjust colors, right? And you can do another pass. Like, okay, I rendered this one, didn't look dark enough. So go here, darken a little bit. If you feel like it needs more saturation, just play with this one, combine it, right? So bring this one up, bring the other one down, the RGB, right? And you get more red tones and stuff. If it's too saturated, do the opposite. Bring this one down, bring this one up. Keep bringing this one down until you get like a darker tone that's not very saturated. But it's a matter of like really comparing to any reference you have. Because like I said, I have like so many of those different types of skin that, it's like I have to pick one that looks like the one I want to go for, right? So it's a matter of preference. So anytime, just apply it again, and then you have a brand new set of poly paint in there to export again. So that's the way to do if you're painting like with the pale skin. I'm gonna do a couple of times here so we can actually do some painting and be able to see it. And then the other way is to actually start fresh, which is not a terrible idea. But in this case here, it's going to be so dark, right? Like the skin is so dark. So this is basically like using the flat color. Those are the tones in there. I don't know if you guys going to be able to see it, but those are the tones I'm using, right? And you're going to notice like there's a bunch of tutorials on the internet. You're going to find like people doing poly paint. And also like in books, I've seen like some tutorial that back in the day, I think it was like Scott something. He was doing painting. And the way that they're approaching the painting was kind of like a traditional way of approaching it, which is like, you know, when people painted those masks for like latex masks for uh, special effects for movies. Uh, what they had to do, they had to use like super saturated colors. Otherwise, like in the movie, you would not translate. So, for example, like you look at the props. So you have like, if you go to ILM one day, I can give you a tour in there. You're gonna see like we have a ton of props from movies, and in some of them the color like looks pretty shitty. You know, it looks like super saturated, very fake looking. The veins are too green, and you know, it's weird. But then when those masks were filmed, it looked really good. You know, it's like otherwise you would not be gonna be able to see them like in the movie for some reason. And then, but that's kind of like the old school. You know, it's like the other reason to use like those super saturated colors is because if you're using latex, you're probably not gonna get like the same subsurface scattering you're gonna get from silicone, right? Latex doesn't have, it's kind of like a rubber surface, doesn't have a lot of scatter going on, is a little bit plain. So I think the intention was always like when they painted those colors super saturated, it would be to kind of like try to build on top of it. You know, it's like many layers of color to simulate like, okay, there's kind of like veins underneath. You know, it's like and things like that. So it's always like building up things like layer by layer, but with super saturated colors at the beginning. And in my case, I just go for what I'm seeing. I don't build that the same way. I think that's kind of like a little bit old school to simulate some layers of subsurface scattering that's not there, right? Like you can simulate scattering just by painting different colors. And I think that's the reason a lot of the stuff was done that way. But nowadays, we rely on software like Arnold to calculate, you know, accurately the subsurface scattering for you. So it's not like you have to simulate the scattering the paint, right? You can simply paint the color as it is, and then you should get the result. So that's why I said like maybe we can paint like the average color and start with that, or we can start with a pale color like this and then basically like color correct it in ZBrush as a starting point, right? So let's do a copy here. Let's see which ones. I think this one is an old one, so I don't need this one. So let me get rid of this model so I don't have a lot of stuff accumulated here. And then I'm gonna just duplicate this top one, which is the one I have the HD. And as soon as I duplicate, the HD is gonna go away, right? So this one is basically gonna put all the way on the top so I'm not confused. This is gonna be the model we're gonna be working on. So again, if I go back to Photoshop and I show you the color average that we had before, which was basically like an average of that whole section of the head, got 50, 30, and 18, right? 50, 30, and 18 out of 255. So if I click this color pick right here, so we're gonna put like 50, 30, 18, oops, 18, right? So that's the average color in there. So if I go to the head itself already selected, I can just say like color, and then just switch to RGB at 100%. And then I can just say fill object, right? So now that's the average color that I can start with. Why you have to pay attention to the to the RGB intensity is because if you had any other color in here, for example, green, you can actually shift the whole thing towards green by using like small increments. For example, if you use like a tiny little intensity instead of 100, and you do like the color fill object again, slowly you can add more and more green to it, right? So make sure if you want to do the color, solid color, just make sure at 100%. So my brain here is like, it's 50, what's that? 50, 30, 18? Yeah, 50, 30, 18, just to confirm. So let's do it again. Color, 50, 30, 18. Let's fill it. So if I was to paint something like this, I probably would have to switch to a shader that can show me something, right? Which in this case here is, it's a little bit way too dark if I switch to the default skin shade. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna go to material, and again, I'm gonna crank this values in here. So the diffuse is gonna crank all the way to 100. And the ambient I can crank as well. So I can actually see the color in there, right? So in terms of if I'm going to start to paint like from scratch like this, I'm probably going to start with adding some of the lighter tones first. So it's going to be very hard here because I don't have like the reference, for example, of what the actual color looks like, because this is crank, right? So if I do a pick like in here, right, it's going to show me a very dark color that's not represented in here because I just changed the shader completely. But I can try something just to see if we can paint like that. Let's see. I think the best bet would be the way I did it before, which is like using like a light skin and then going from there. So I'm gonna just go up. So you see like it's right here. I'm gonna go up around the middle. And I'm gonna shift a little bit towards yellow. You can see right there, right, the color of the other subtools. And then in terms of the brushes that I use to paint, again, I'm gonna go to a very low resolution intensity for my sRGB, for my RGB, not sRGB. So 5 for intensity. You can go even lower than that for subtle stuff. I'm gonna start with 5, and then I can start just with the regular standard brush with no alpha sign, just to block the biggest forms, right? The biggest colors. So I'm just gonna start with the nose in here, adding a little bit of color. Just for a reference, if you're using that color I pointed to, if you want a reference for this color here, it's 175, 120, 76. That's what I picked randomly there, or just as a reference, right? So I'm painting the nose right now, and it's gonna be a mystery to me to know if you guys gonna be able to see anything at all, because it's very subtle, right? But again, I can post like a screenshot or something. So I'm gonna just paint on top in here just slightly. Just block like with the regular color. I'm gonna look for other landmarks. So I did the whole nose, starting with the cartilage in here and going around this area, right? So now I'm gonna look for cartilage here. So I'm gonna go to the ear. I'm gonna add a little bit of this tone around the ear. This whole area right here, but not the edges right there, just the inside part. Little spiral in there. Now I'm gonna look for areas like landmarks, like bony landmarks, for example, like this area here of the forehead, and maybe add a little bit, very subtle as well. And look for other areas like you know, around the lips. So for the lips, I can, instead of like using this yellowish lighter tone, I'm just like blending a little bit more of the nose in there. Instead of using that tone, I can actually start shifting towards like a little bit more very desaturated magenta, right? So if I go like towards magenta, right, let's see, right in between here, for example, like between red and magenta, I can, if I go to a color, for example, a lighter color, I'm gonna desaturate, you go to the left, almost gray, right? It's just like magenta and gray mixed together. And then I'm gonna start painting the lips in here, like an average color. So it's gonna introduce a little bit more like a peachy color to it. But obviously, once I shift this entire thing down again by tweaking the shader again, everything's gonna go dark, right? So if I went back here to, let's see, 80 and then 20 here, or even less than that, then you're gonna get back to that dark tone, right? But you can see the variation. You can see a little bit of the tones I added already there and there. It's just like easier to see if you really crank this. I think that's gonna be the only way to paint. But it's gonna be a little bit of kind of like a blind paint, right? Because you don't know exactly the colors you're picking. I'm actually just, the way I'm using this right now is just like getting the average color, the one we painted the entire face, and then just using offsets of that color. So shifting from this towards this, right? To get that little yellowish for the cartilage in place like that. And then same thing, like around the middle in here, shifting towards that color and then desaturating it for the lips, right? So everything like with a very low intensity. And not only that, I'm not using a lot of pressure in my tablet right now. So I have the intensity very low, but also very low pressure in my hand right now. So now we can start like introducing some of the same colors. For example, like this kind of like a pinkish around here. Can introduce a little bit of that around the eyelids, but just at the edges. So I'm gonna do like around here. It's again like it's a very desaturated magenta, almost like gray, and it's like you know, not quite magenta, right? It's kind of in between red and magenta in there. So it's good that you use like all these very desaturated colors. You know, it's like this gather is gonna saturate things naturally, especially when it mixes with that peach orange subsurface gathering color already. So all this stuff here, if it's too saturated, it's just gonna make things blown up. You know. So I'm gonna start like with another tone, which is like I'm gonna start with like pure, not pure black, but very dark black, brown. So for example, I could go around here, and then I'm gonna go all the way down to here. Not very saturated again, kind of desaturated. So you can see in the eyes in there, the color has shifted. So it's like a very desaturated, not quite black, right, but very dark. And then I'm gonna introduce that around the sides of the nose. In this case, for my character, right, it could be different for yours. Sides of the nose. I'm gonna get plenty of that in the muzzle area. And then the chin. And all the way around here. So in my case, for my character, I added a lot of dark in the neck as well. So for the neck, I went pretty dark. Let me just make this bigger right there. Went pretty dark in there, but again, this color is all shifted. So when I shift back to the default material, you're gonna be able to see this is gonna be very, very dark. All the stuff I'm painting right here, and then you can introduce some of this darkness I'm doing around the stubble, right? Obviously, you're gonna add hair later, so you're gonna get the tiny little pieces of stubble. But this darkness, I can actually start painting around the ears, for example, right? Remember, like everything, taking account like the physicality of things, right? Like the, you know, it's like if you have someone like in a tribe, right? Like these guys are probably like hunting or doing stuff outdoors all the time. They probably have a very healthy outdoors life, but there's a lot of sun involved, right? And then although like the darker skin is going to protect a lot the skin, you still get like, you know, it's like in certain areas, for example, like around here, the ears, you're going to get this area darker, right? Like I get like very, very dark, you know, around the sun and stuff. So yeah, just introduce some of that, like same for, you know, forehead, areas like that, you can actually introduce a little bit more darker colors. And also because some people have darker tones. For example, like I've seen some references that around this area here of the zygomatic bone and the eye bag, everything gets a little darker, right? Like some of my subjects that I was looking, they're very dark spots, like almost like those circles that propagate, you know, it's like, and some of them go all the way to the side of the face. So almost like you get like those gigantic darker spots. It's very interesting. And so basic colors, you know, it's like in this case here, because all the tones are so dark, it's hard for me to actually introduce like too much of like too many color variations. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna paint a little bit more here, and then I'm gonna shift back to our other model, which is the one with the lighter skin, and show you what the approach would be around that as well. So for this guy here, you see I'm just blocking all the colors with a very simple brush. Let me switch back here to the material, the default we had. So like 80 and then around like 20. Right, so we got a little bit more variation now. We have like some lips in there. There's more dark around the eyes. I can see the cartilage in there. I hope you guys can see this because it looks amazing. No, it doesn't. But yeah, around cartilage, yeah, it's starting to take form, you know. But then let's say, I would say, like, because I don't have a lot of experience painting like darker tones like that, to find out like the subtleties in like the variations, and for example, like the greens and those other colors I was talking about before, to me, it's going to be always easier to see like in a lighter skin and then shift it towards the darker skin again. So I'm gonna do some of the work in here. So the same way I did, let me just copy this one as a reference. And then let's bring this one up like I did before. And that's gonna be the one we're gonna be painting. So let's start with an average color, just like I did with the darker tone. And then I think this one is easier for you guys to see, right? I mean, so let's see, I'm gonna just pick like an averaging here. Let's say, one way to do that, either I can go like all the way in the back here, there's not a lot of paint in there, or I can just like blur the entire thing, right? So let's just pick the color, maybe like the back of his ear in here. And then the average color I got in here is like 187, 138, and 105. Like a ballpark for a lighter skin. So it has a little bit more green and blue as well, right? It's not like too red. It's a little bit orangey, peachy. So with that color, I can just go color. First, crank my RGB intensity all the way. Color, and then fill object. So now I have just an average color like that. And then the thing is, in this case here, I don't have HD geometry just yet, right? So what I can do is just like go HD for this guy so we can actually test this. But yeah, maybe I'm not gonna go like full on all the way to 72 million polygons because I already have the scene with that other subtool like that. But still, you're gonna be able to see what I'm doing with the brushes. So, but just bear in mind that you should go all the way up if you have like your HD model. Just enter HD and you're gonna be painting in HD at all times from now on, right? But in this case, I'm gonna just do like an HD, but without going too crazy. So I'm gonna divide 1 time, 2 times. So I got to 104. Let's see, one more, 157. Okay, the scene can handle that. So let's just reconstruct my polygroups. Sure, already good there, so they're good. So before I even go to HD, I can start just like doing a little coloring in here, right? So just gonna double check my material. It's pretty average right now, so it's basically like the ambient, I think it's like 10 and 80 by default, or something like that. So you can see that it's a very light tone right now. We're gonna be able to see things. So I'm gonna do the same thing with the light skin, right? I'm gonna start without any alphas in there, just like blocking the colors. So I'm gonna do a similar approach here. But you know, it's like for the lighter skin, the first thing I would do, I think I would go the opposite, because that's normally how I approach. Go like darker tones first, and then bring things up with the lighter tones at the end. So it's gonna be kind of like the opposite of what I just did in there. Kind of made sense for me when I was doing the darker skin. But here I'm gonna just incorporate like the darker tones first. I can start with slightly more red. So I'm gonna grab this color here, pick, then I'm gonna bring it down and then shift towards slightly more reddish, but without saturating too much. You can see like in the color of the eyes in there, it's kind of like a, not wine, right? It's kind of like between wine and kind of like a brown. So it's kind of like a dark reddish, desaturated red in there. So with that, I go switch back to my RGB at maybe like 3% only. And I can start coloring areas like the nose, just to introduce a little bit of, you know, it's like a blood flow. Inside of the nostrils as well, can introduce some more of that. Get a little darker in there. I can go towards the ear. The very broad brush, right? Inside of the ear here, just painting this entire area a little bit more red. Again, kind of the saturated red. Around the eyes, like the eyes are surprisingly deceiving, you know, it's like the eyelids. Because if you leave the tone of the eyelids just like vanilla, like, you know, it's like without any color other than the default color you picked for the average, it doesn't pop, you know, it's like it doesn't look correct. But as soon as you start adding a little bit more darkness to it, you can start with some reds like I'm doing, but then introduce a little purple and some browns and even greens later on, especially in the inner parts. Then things start to look a little bit more interesting and more realistic, you know. So for the lips, in this case here, if I was going like for a lighter skin, I would go with the same reddish color around the lips, just as a first pass. But just remember that if we're going for a darker skin, depending of how you're going to approach, for example, you're going to find some subjects that they have like very dark lips, you know, it's like, so they have dark skin and dark lips. Some have like, for example, like that young man, he had like the upper lip was pretty dark and then the lower lip was pretty pink, right? You're gonna find all kinds of variations in there, but it's all a matter of like how you want to do it. So just gonna paint this, introduce those red values in here. I'm gonna get areas, for example, like of vascularity, right? Like if, for example, like this area here, I'm gonna introduce a little bit of red as well, a little bit more in the neck. But everything should be very, very subtle for you guys to see. Those tones have to be built like layer by layer, always using a low intensity, like 3, something like that. So I'm gonna go to the sides of the face in here, like the temporalis, incorporate some of this redness as well in there. Then I'm gonna go towards the cheeks and add a little bit redness as well. Probably the nose is gonna have a tint of more red than the cheeks in here. But again, like it all depends of the character, right? Like around here, the center, I'm gonna add a little bit of more red as well. And then now we're gonna start like adding some more, different tones in here. I'm gonna start with kind of shift like almost like towards bluish in here. So it's gonna be like between, yeah, pretty purple. Actually, it's very purple. So like at the very end in here, you're gonna find this purple color. And then I can actually desaturate it. So I'm gonna get darker and a little closer to gray. So gray, full gray is like right here. I'm gonna bring it, just introduce a little bit of purple, almost like bluish. And then that tone in here, I can actually introduce some of that on the eye bags as well. So I'm gonna just introduce some of that. It has to be subtle. It has to mix with the previous color. So not a lot of pressure used, right? Just gonna get the little darker tone in there. Same for the lips. I'm gonna add a little bit of that, not much. Just like cover it slightly. Not a lot of that I'm gonna introduce like to the ears, just like a tinge of it in the side part, that's it, not a lot. I can add a little bit of that like inside of the nostrils again. I'm gonna mix the redness with a little bit of this desaturated purple, right? And then I can start playing with the darker tones now. I can start with the brown. So I'm gonna go like a little bit less red. So kind of like an orange that became very dark, right? So brown in there. And then those tones I can actually use to support like around the nose in here. Has a little tint of yellow to it as well. And then around the chin, so kind of like around here, kind of like you can actually start finding like some of those landmarks in the wrinkles, like a nasolabial, introduce a little bit of that around it, not much. Around this darker area right here, oops, in the corners, the inner corners of the eyes, like the right there, introduce a little bit of that brownish color. And really anywhere you want to, incorporate some kind of like tan, things like that. So I can probably like the top of the head in here, gonna go a little bit darker. Unless you have hair, right? Like with the hair is the opposite. The hair is protecting the scalp, so it's probably like the scalp is gonna be super pale and white in there. That's what happens when you shave your hair for the first time, right? And you look, it's just like super pale because the hair is protecting it. So basically like adding just like those layers one by one, and painting very, very softly. It's like very, very low intensity at all times. Doing a first test, like exporting maps like that, just testing in Maya to see how they are turning out. So we have the perfect idea about like what's needed in terms of the next step. So now that we have like those tones in place, let's get some other colors. For example, like you can get like a green, but not pure green like that, like lime green, right? Go more towards blue in here. It's almost like a teal color in the middle, but I'm gonna go like darker than that. So teal, but almost desaturated to gray as well. So something like that. Maybe even a little bit more blue. And then I can introduce some of that color around the inner part of the eye right here. And then around the eye, just very slightly. Just like some, you know, veins, simulate some veins underneath, but just like it's a tiny little tint of green. Probably like this tone, I'm not gonna use in many places, but I would say like around the eyes here, definitely. And then we can go to something like, let's just bring this material down now in diffuse so you can actually see. Let's see if I can do a combination of both. Let's see. Yeah, it's gonna get too dark, I guess. Yeah, it's not gonna be too good to see. Let's see if I switch to a flat color. Yeah, the tones on the flat color, they're very, very basic, right? Like that's basically what I did in there. Some of the tones are not mixing together just yet. So I would have to actually use maybe like some smooth to blend them together. Or, you know, it's like just keep painting more detail, but not more detail, but it's just like blocking the colors a little bit further. So this is like a very basic color in there. So how do we add like the other tones, right? Like for example, like the detailed skin, right? Because right now it's just like plain color just blocked in there. So I would have to go HD first. I'll just select a couple of those guys. And then remember, like from now on, once you have everything blocked, you're gonna switch to HD, and just like from that point on is all HD. I'm gonna turn off here, invert, go HD around here. Let's see how much we can get HD. Okay, so if I go solo, that's basically like I got this whole chunk in HD, 35 million polygons. Okay, so now let's look at some of the brushes I have in here. So far we have been using just the regular default brush, the standard brush, but I have this brush here I normally use. It's called Poly Paint spray, right? So this Poly Paint spray is basically like the standard brush with, I'm gonna remove the color variation. So it's gonna be just like those settings, placement at 5, scale 1, and then flow at 0.25. And then for the alpha, there's an alpha here, which is the alpha 23. So that's the one I'm using with the default settings. If I crank the intensity very high in here and I switch to a black, for example, oh, black's not gonna be possible because of that bug, right? But let's see, something like this. If I go black on the other side, it actually works, look at that. So if I go like here, you're gonna see the type of detail it's gonna put, right? So you can see what's going on in there. Obviously, I'm not gonna go with that color. I'm just trying to make you see what I'm gonna be doing from now on, because if it's too subtle for you guys to see, at least you have an idea about what's happening. So this is gonna be applied, but very, very softly. If you wanna go like even more spread out, you can actually go with the flow and put like very low flow in here. So you get a little bit less of that, right? So it's a little bit more spread out like that. So everything I'm gonna be doing in terms of tone now is gonna come in the same form. So I'm gonna go back to my intensity very low to around 3 in here. And then, and let's, I think, let's see. No, I don't think I have it here, but let's say, let's look for a reference, for example. Oh, what happened? Man, everything's crashing today. Jesus, my Explorer just crashed. Let's see if it's gonna open again. Oh, there you go. Okay, so let's see. Personal documents and Stan Winston, then reference. So let's look at his skin here. Like his skin is not pale by any means. Like he had a kind of like a brownish skin. But I think he was like maybe like a fake tan as well combined with it. But let's see if we can find like something like this. Some interesting tones in there, right? So in this case here, if you're painting your colors, you're gonna start observing those type of tones, right? You have a bunch of things obviously that comes from the lighting itself, like some reflections and all, but you're definitely gonna see some yellows around the eye bags in here, combined with some greens and then some purples as well. And in all those areas, I'm gonna have to try to translate this into my painting, and I'm gonna do that way. You know, it's like we're using the spray for everything. So I'm gonna do this, and now I'm gonna try to bring some of those colors into consideration here. So I have my RGB intensity all the way down to 3, and I'm gonna start like bringing some of those tones up, right? So if I have like the cartilage that I was mentioning, for example, the nose, right? You can see like there's a little halo right there. So I can actually introduce that by picking the color, the average color. So I'm gonna get the picker and then pick one spot that's still light in here. And I'm gonna go even lighter and then shift towards yellow. Almost like white and then kind of like pale yellow in there. Very, very low intensity, right? And I'm just gonna start painting, for example, like this little halo around here. If it is a little bit too noisy using this alpha here, you can always use just the spray and remove the alpha for now. So it gives you a different result. If I crank the intensity here, you're gonna be able to see it. It gives this kind of like a cloudy, right? Without being too spotty. And then there's a bunch of combinations. Either you use with alpha 23 and you get this very noisy pattern like that, right? Or you use this one without the alpha and you get this very cloudy thing. Or you can do a combination of both. Not a combination, but an in-between, which is basically like instead of like picking that alpha that has a lot of detail, you can pick one of those small alphas here, for example, like 46, 45, and then you still get some dots like that, but without being too much, you know? So you can always use this one as well. So I'm gonna go around the nose here again, and I'm gonna do some of that pass, intensity very low, 3. Just gonna paint this lighter areas for the cartilage around here. And I'm gonna go around the eyebrow, do the same thing, get lighter with it. I'm gonna go around the lips. Remember that halo that I mentioned in there, like the, not the halo, the edges of the lips. Maybe not the best shader. Let's try this one. So I'm gonna get like the very edge of it and just add some lighter tone in there. Same for the bottom one. Let's switch back to flat color. Yeah, I can see a little bit of that. If it's too splotchy, I mean, like you can always test with different alphas, right? If this one looks still a little weird, maybe pick a bigger one, like 37, and then you're gonna notice that's gonna be different looking. It goes back to a little bit more cloudy, right? A little bit more diffused and mixed together. Let's see how we're doing with the time. Oh, almost time. And then let's say if I go around here, I can actually paint some of that light color around like the eye bags underneath, which you're gonna be mixing with more and more yellow and green. So we're gonna do like the lighter pass first. I hope you guys can see this stuff. Otherwise, I'm gonna have to definitely post like screenshots, because I know in the past like it was very hard for people to see it. And then I'm gonna be switching back and forth between like this kind of like pale green for this area. Just a little bit. I can go a little bit more lime green, just a little bit, and then lighter. Yeah, so that introduced a little bit more of the green I was expecting. And then if something you go like overboard, you notice that, okay, that took over too much. You can always like pick your average color in some place you didn't paint yet. And then you can just go and very, fast, just like do a little brushing on top of it, just to mix back to the original color. And then you remove that super green tone that was in there, right? So you start like blending things all the time. So for this area around the nose, again, like my reds, I'm never gonna go like saturated red like that, because that looks terrible. It looks like a doll, right? Like every time you paint something saturated, it's kind of like a common mistake, It's like you try to incorporate reds. Don't go with like a pure red ever, right? Like you start with a very desaturated one. If you need to crake later, it's fine, but for now, just like pick something that's always towards gray. So it has red in it, but it's a very desaturated red. Because all this color you're adding here, once the subsurface scattering kicks in, is gonna saturate things more. So you don't need to worry about it, you know? So lips. So I'm adding like everything is gonna be with this spray from now on. So I'm gonna introduce some more oranges now around the cheeks. Add some more oranges in there. Gets a little bit more tan towards the eye. So kind of mix it a little bit with bags in there, but without overriding it too much. And then the same color actually bring it towards the chin. It's kind of like orange color in there with the spray. Then you slowly start mixing things in. And a little bit more around the muzzle. This area here got a little dark, so I'm gonna just like pick like a normal color, default color, and just blend it back around there. And then once you have like all those darker tones applied, let's see if I can get a little bit more like that. I'm gonna go to the side of the face in here, get a little bit more darkness as well. Keep the lighter areas just around the nose and the lips and eyes, so like the main features in the face. Also the, you know, it's like for the ears, cartilage, right? But everything else is a little bit darker. So let's see, a little darker on the side of the face. Temporalis again. And it's gonna be like a time consuming, but it's cool that you can actually build like all those layers and layers of stuff, you know? So it starts simple like this. Everything is blocked, right? I start with a pure color with no brushes. Then I started with a little bit more like a broad brush now, just like to add some variation, some of this noise in there. And then at the end, what actually gives like this nice little tone at everything, it's like if you introduce some of that, this alpha 23 here, but with a very light tone. For example, like shift towards yellow and get like this very light tone, almost white. And then let's see if it's too strong at 3. If it is, we can actually bring it down. And then if you paint it, yeah, this is gonna be cool. Probably like you're gonna be able to see if I post for you the screenshots. I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna post some screenshots so you can see what I'm doing. But yeah, it actually adds a lot of life just having this little sparks, you know, kind of like lots of little white spots everywhere. Kind of like adds this tiny little color complexity that wasn't in there before. Just by doing that, like go everywhere with a little bit of this noisy pale white, without going too small, but not too big either. I mean, you're gonna see in the, when I post the screenshot. I can actually attach the screenshot to the lesson. So you're gonna be able to see the video and also the screenshot. Like that. Still a little simple in there, but that's a lot of little passes we're gonna be doing one after the other one. Now, when it comes like to micro detail and things like that, then we're gonna have to get like into more specifics about what types of brushes that I'm using here. And for the most part, you're gonna be like a combination of those spray, just like tweaked in a certain way. But there's a couple of things here I use. For example, let's see, bone texture under veins. Let's see if this is a veins, but not the one I want. There's another one. Let's see. Just a second, because I always get lost with this. Skin blah, 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 skin color S, spray 1, spray 2. Oh, this one here. So I have like this liver one. So the liver one uses this brush like alpha 15. It's basically like the standard brush with alpha 15. And I use this ones like for liver spots. And I think I use, yeah, the focal shift is -30, so it's a little bit sharper. And I think for the alpha is a little tweaked as well. So it has like, curvature is the same, but I have a contrast cranked to 2.5 in here. And then all those settings, I don't know if I changed anything else, but it seems like kind of normal. And then those ones, if I use like again, like a very strong color here so you can see, something like that. It's just like for painting, you know, spots like that. So this kind of spots are gonna be painting everywhere. I'm gonna go as far as doing like a pure color ones. Again, like not at full red like that, but a little bit more desaturated. And I'm gonna go like a lower intensity, maybe 5. So I can start introducing some of those spots like that. You know, it's like pick some areas I wanna do it. Maybe a little bit more towards brown instead of like red. Something like that. So slowly I'm gonna introduce like all those little spots everywhere. And then those gonna be mixed with some reddish ones as well. So those gonna be like the livery spots that I normally apply for the temple here, right? So I'm gonna get like some larger areas with them like that. What you can do as well, like you can create masks, right? And then paint just inside of the mask if you wanna have a little bit more control to it. But this is gonna be just like with the pores we were just discussing the other day when you sculpt the pores. That's just the first step, right? Like this stuff, like it's layers and layers of complexity added on top of it. So it's basically like doing the same thing over and over again, using variations for the intensity, for the size, all that stuff that I spoke about, like when you're sculpting, gonna be applied to the painting, right? So it's a matter of like, okay, how much variation you want to add. If you add too little variation, it's gonna end up looking very plasticky. So the whole model looks very plasticky. And if you add too much stuff, then it becomes too busy to the point that looks like the skin is completely dirty. So just like with the sculpting detail, it's always a balance, you know, it's like you have to find a balance that works. So those ones are gonna do a lot of that. So this little brush here, it's gonna go a long way for me, like adding all kinds of detail. You see like he has this little spots right there in the lips as well. All that stuff I can paint. For example, I can start with dark in the middle, right? Dark like that, and then shift to something a little bit more red. And then paint around that, add a little halo. It got a little saturated. Let's see, less saturation. Otherwise it gets glowy. So like that, around those spots. And then I can start like adding a little bit more complexity to it. And then in his case, he has plenty of reddish around, like in the internal part of the lips in there. So I can actually incorporate a little bit more saturation, more towards magenta again, and maybe a little darker. And you start with that around that area. And then slowly build up like a little bit more saturation, right? So I'm getting a little bit more in the cavity in there. So I'm gonna get maybe a little bit more red now and more towards magenta even more. And maybe a little lighter too. So something like that with very low intensity, maybe 2. Just to get a little bit more of the pink in there, but without going too saturated again. Something like that. And then now let's talk about like the micro veins and things like that. You see like for his nose in there, there's tons of micro veins. And then one way to do it's like just using a very, let me just get this maximized. So let's get like a regular brush in here, for example, like my carve brush. I have one that's called vein brush here. Let's see, veins. Oh no, this is the one I wanted to show you guys. So check this out. Like if you look at this alpha here, see like this is lightning, right? And I found this, I was thinking about like doing like micro veins and how to sculpt them and how to paint them. For example, like for the eyes, we're gonna be talking about eyes tomorrow. And then I was thinking about in nature, you get all kinds of, you know, it's almost like echoes of ourselves, right? Like you're gonna find patterns in nature, like in tree branches and stuff like that. And you look at your vein patterns, it's all the same, right? Everything's part of the same universe. And so I thought about lightning, all those awesome patterns in lightning. And then I thought like this would make a great vein pattern. So I actually found a picture of lightning and I just like created an alpha in Photoshop and I brought it here. So if I do like, again, like very strongly, you see like I'm actually painting and sculpting at the same time, but I'm gonna turn off for now the Z add. So just to paint it, if I do in black in here, let's see this side, it looks like this, right? So you can do that as well, like find the lighting. You're probably gonna be able to find exactly the same one I found, like black sky, right? Like the night, and then just like white, and then you can just like save this as an alpha, you know, or as an image, and then bring it as an alpha in ZBrush, and then add a little bit of radial fade, just so you get the like fading. And then this guy's I used a lot, for example, for Stan Winston around his nose. So again, I would do like a red, but like kind of like the saturated red, a little bit like that. And I would go around this area here and do quite a lot of them. But I mean, like this is like, it's still not red enough. Let's get a little bit more saturated, something like that. Yeah, something like that. And then get a lot of those guys to actually show up in there in different intensities and sizes as well. So for example, you can go like intensity very low, not very low, but like, let's say 30%. And you can get some bigger ones like that at 30%. Let's see, around there. And then maybe like changing direction around here, kind of like almost like micro varicose veins, right? And then you can get a little bit stronger now, like bigger intensity and maybe like a smaller size. So to create detail in skin, both like for painting and sculpting, that's basically what I keep doing. I was like switching sizes and intensities just to add more layers of complexity. So it looks like things are a little deeper. If you do those bigger ones, like deeper like that, right? Like, so make like the bigger ones very faded, and then the small ones you make like a little stronger. So it almost like looks like the veins are starting from like the deeper layers of the skin and then getting all the way to the surface with the little ones, right? So it's kind of like a way to give the impression of things being in different layers, right, underneath the skin. So this brush I use quite a lot, like for micro veins. It's kind of like around the nose in here, and also the the face. So sometimes you're gonna find some of them in there. Around the eyes as well. So for example, if I get something a little lighter, I can do like in basically like in symmetry in here. So let's just do a couple of them like around the eyes, like the eyelids right here, and try to keep like any variation in terms of angle. So at least like they don't look all the same, right? But trying to go like in a similar direction with a little bit of an angle. And then let's see, like, so that's kind of like what I do in there. And then going back and forth and looking at the reference, you're gonna look, for example, I can go back to my poly paint, right? And then I can introduce some of those tones like similar to the one I have here around the lips now, a little bit more saturated. And then just incorporate that around the cheeks, maybe with a little bit more intensity. So let's see, a little bit more saturated, a little bit more red, but not by much. Something like that. Just add, yeah, some bigger detail. So that really blends things together, So instead of like using the very tiny brush, now I'm using a little bigger, and it's actually adding more and more detail. It's almost like freckles at some point, but it's actually, it makes a huge difference. This one, for example, like combined with the tiny ones to, it's like to bring the forms up, like the tiny ones I was using there, those really bring things together. Yeah, this one, when you see the screenshot, I think you're gonna have a much better idea what's going on. Do you guys have any questions? I know it's being very hard to see things, but I hope it's not terrible. But just ask me, and then I swear this is gonna be posted together with the video, so you guys have no doubt about what's going on here. Basically, I'm doing like the bigger splotches of color here now. Basically, like using the same spray, but just with the bigger brush, and just like spraying with a very low intensity at 3. and it's starting to come together.
Hey, Chris.
Yes.
I have a question. It's a little bit further back, but I'm not sure if you covered it or not. But with the HD geometry, when we're getting done with the pores and all that kind of stuff, is there any way to bake that into the model somehow? I'm just trying to think of how I can use that for non-CG purposes.
Yeah, definitely.
Print or fabrication.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good question. So the way it works is like this. So let's say I have my HD model in here, right? I have like 35 million polygons at this point. The thing is, like, if you want to use like for 3D printing something from HD, you can always bake this. But the thing is, like, once you bake, you're gonna lose all the UV detail, right? Like the UV's information. So if you don't care about that, if you want just the model, it should be totally fine. So for example, if I want to bake this, I would try to bake like in chunks of, not too big. So if I have 35 million polygons for this entire face, I'm going to try to split at least in half, something like this. I'm going to hide half of it. And then let's see how many polygons I got. And there I got 12 million polygons. That should be good. So all you have to do, actually, let's do something else here first. You can go to your, let's see, geometry, and then crease. You can just press crease one time. I hope it doesn't crash.
I was just thinking it's a bad time to ask you about this. So
yeah.
In case it crashes.
Yeah. So I got the, actually, before I do that, let's do like a, for example, if I do like a, let's see if I can do a poly group for this entire thing. Let's see if it accepts in here. Let's try group visible. So yeah, it worked. And then let's do the creasing here. Sorry. It's a good question, actually. So crease. And now it's going to go back and it's going to show the rest of it, but at least I have that poly group I can select at any time. So I'm going to go and select just that poly group again. And then you can just say, make polymesh 3D.
Oh, okay.
Right? So you click that one, it's going to bake. Now it already switched. I have a polymesh 3D that has 12 million polygons with everything baked into it. If it's super, if you put a ton of detail, everything's going to be preserved in there. So I have to go back to my model now, reverse the mask, right? And I can just, I can do the same thing again, like poly groups and then group visible. And then I can just go to geometry and crease. This one's gonna have 22 million polygons. So that, yeah, so I would go a little lower than that. So I would do like in chunks of maybe like 15 million polygons, something like that. And then I'm gonna go again and say, make polymesh 3D, right? So that's gonna bake another chunk. So now I have those two pieces here. So this one now is the polymesh 3D. And then I can actually just do like append and then get the second chunk, which is right there. And then turn off the solo. And now I have the two pieces and they're basically like baked from HD. So one has 12 million polygons, the other one has 22 million polygons. And because I used the crease for this area here, you should have like a perfect match, Yeah. If you don't use the crease, probably this is gonna break. You're gonna have a big gap in between those parts. So yeah, that's the way you basically bake from HD. You can bake like a lot of stuff, but they have to come like in different subtools, otherwise your computer explodes.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a really cool trick, actually.
Awesome, man.
Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. Let's just delete those guys because my computer is gonna choke here. And then let's go back to, did I delete the wrong one? No, I'm the right one. Okay, cool. Okay, so we are back to this guy, and let's switch back here to the flat color. And then that's the thing, it's like, should I keep painting it and then just like post the progress for you guys to see? I was like, can you guys see anything at all what I'm doing here? If I stop moving, maybe like it's gonna show a little bit.
You can see most things pretty fine on my end, actually.
Oh, okay.
Some when you were doing like the really subtle like greens and teals, I
Uh-huh.
couldn't really see much, but
Hmm.
everything else was pretty visible.
Oh, okay. That's good. Yeah. Bear in mind that the video is going to compress. This is going to look pretty bad. So I
How
need.
about how about Chris, if you take a screenshot and put it on the chat, maybe
Yeah,
that will be a fast way to share.
yeah, I can do this now. But I'm definitely going to do this for the. Let's see. Why am I? Okay, here's my bar. All right. Chat 4. Okay. Let's do like a print screen. I actually just saved this one. Let's see. Document, export. Let's do a JPEG. And then it's going to be poly. Yeah, I can update a couple of times. Poly paint 1. And that's going to go under, let's see, images. Poly paint 1. And then OK for quality 100%. Okay. Let's do this. Tribes, images, poly paint. Here you go. Let's see. Yeah, I just posted on the chat so you can see, like, it's very simple, very beginning of it, but at least you can see things instead of like just relying on what I'm saying. And then basically like the entire work here is going to be observe what I'm seeing there. For example, like this area here of the eye bags, there's a bunch of things combined in there, right? So you're going to see like there's some greens like from veins in there. You know, there's this interesting vascularity going on in here. So everything around the circle in here is going to have a tiny little bit of green and a little bit of yellow as well. So I'm going to go and switch here towards, I call it like almost like ochre, just a little bit more green than ochre in there. Something like that. So that can carry both the, you know, the colors I'm looking for, basically like the, let's see how intense I need to go here. So it's going to be like a little bit of green, a little bit of yellow. So that's going to help with this bags in here. I'm going to be doing this around this area. And then right before the end of the lesson, I can actually just, you know, upgrade the screenshot for you guys to see. So I'm going to introduce some of that as well around here, just a little bit on top of the, around the mouth. Similar to the treatment we have in there. It's very pale right here around like the eyebrows. And I like to have like this area very pale right below the eyebrows. So around the eyebrows, I'm gonna actually make it a little darker again. And just keep like whitish underneath the eyebrows. It's almost like it's a place that's in the shade most of the time, right? You have the eyebrows covering it. Just like you have like your scalp white, right? Like if you shave it because it's protected by the hair. The eyebrows are actually casting a lot of shadow in there. So you get like this very pale area underneath the eyes, which is like for a guy with the darker skin is gonna be different, but I still wanna have a little bit of that color difference in there for effect. So I'm gonna switch back. At any time, if I found a color that's interesting in here, I can always pick the color or an average of it at any time and just use that as a blending technique, right? So for example, like if I have an area that's too red in here, there's another one that's too white in here, I can actually pick the red color around there, but because that's not the pure color, that's already mixed with whatever was underneath, and I'm doing everything in layers, so that can be used as a color just like for mixing, right? So just like go around and mix with the surrounding areas. Do some of that. And then let's add a little bit more of like, you can actually do some hand painting of veins, which I do a lot as well. So I use those tiny ones, the micro veins, but I also do like, you know, hand painted ones. So if I do like, just use like one of those carved ones here. The carved ones is basically like the one I was using before. So it's like alpha 39 tweaked, right, for carving. Actually, I picked like a thinner one. I think this one is thinner. So let's see how it looks like. Let's switch to a dark color here so you can see what I'm doing. Looks like this, right? So basically like free form veins, right? You can paint with that. So I'm just gonna do like, again, like something towards a little bit more red, but a little bit more desaturated, kind of halfway right here. Let's see if it's too dark. It is a little dark, a little bit too brown. Maybe go towards red a little bit more here. Just don't want to go too saturated. Yeah, that sounds good. So this one is cool because if you're using an alpha 39 tweaked with a little curve like that, right? Yeah, if I do like very strong, you're gonna see there is kind of like a halo around it, right? It's cool for scars as well, right? You're gonna get that kind of like inflamed little thing around it. But it's cool for veins because it's almost like looks like there is a piece that's more in the surface and it's a little bit, you know, it's like underneath the surface at the same time. So I can use like, again, my intensity very like lower than what I had before. And I can start like actually doing, let me just do like some patterns here with a higher intensity so you can see it. But, you know, it's like you can start with a very low intensity like that. And then you use some variation in your pressure, you know, it's like to kind of like branch it out and then like go lower intensity and then a little higher again, a little thicker. You know, so you get like this little patterns of, you know, it's like little branches, right? You can actually introduce. So this kind of stuff is good like for around, again, like around the nose and the eyes specifically. And the cheeks. So the cheeks, you can find a bunch of those, like especially like in older people. It's kind of like a little varicose veins. So I'm gonna do maybe a little bit more saturated than that. Let's try that. Let's get some around the cheeks in here. Maybe a lower intensity like that. Let's see. It went a little bit too pink for my taste. Let's get darker. It's not bad if you introduce some variation, like some areas a little bit more saturated than others, especially if you're trying to do like those veins. And sometimes you do one that's a little bit dark. You can actually introduce a little bit of a little bit more live red on top of it, but very, very subtle, you know, just to make it pop. But I'm gonna, you know, add some of them in here. You're gonna see once I update your chat in there that this is gonna be working differently. I'm gonna do some of them around here for the eyes. And again, like I'm doing with very low intensity and with a very light touch as well, because I want to create impression that things are a little bit more embedded in the skin, right? And for everything that I want to look more superficial to the skin, I can have things a little bit sharper and more intense, right? So I can crank the intensity a little bit more and just make all this detail a little bit smaller. So at least like that's how I see it, you know. It's like when I observe the form, I can see like that some of the bigger wrinkles, sometimes they're kind of like they're deeper, a little bit more buried. And then they kind of like flare, you know, it's like from underneath and then go towards the surface where you have these small blood vessels. And that's basically what I try to emulate with those, you know, with this paint technique. So I'm gonna do this here as well. A lot of this you're gonna see, for example, like older people are gonna see on top of the nose around here. You're gonna get some strong ones sometimes. Sometimes they're kind of like clusters of them. I'm just gonna paint a few of them in here. And then basically, like, I think that would be the best approach for you guys, even if you're doing like darker skin, because that's exactly how I did mine. And it was easy to control, you know. It's like once I have all this stuff in place and I shift everything to a darker tone, then a lot of the subtlety I'm able to put in here is gonna, you know, it's like it's something that I cannot simply paint on a darker skin because I cannot see exactly what's going on, you know. And with this one here, because there's more contrast between the lighter tones and darker tones, it's easier to see. And then when you transform it to a darker skin, it carries over, and then it becomes very subtle, but it's all there, you know. It's like all the information is in there. So it's like, it's more like a matter of like how humanly possible it is to see things, you know. It's like if you're painted that darker skin. So I think this approach here, at least for me in the future, I'm probably going to do the same, you know. Use a lighter skin and then just like convert it to a darker skin. I think it seems like it worked very well for what I needed. But again, so all this stuff it's just as new for me as it is for most of you. You know, it's like exploring those different types of skin. I don't feel like I nailed, for example, like the Native American guy, the skin at all. You should have kind of like an olive tone to it. And it's another one of those models I have to go back and improve. Both the model itself, which I'm not completely happy, and also the texture, you know. So yeah, just introduce some of that. And then let's go now and explore another little brush that I have here, which is a very useful one. That's the stubble brush. So let's take a look if I find it here. So I have the pimple, blah, blah, blah. And I have stubble, and stubble better. It has to be me to name something so smart like that, right? Stubble better. What does that mean, right? So this one, actually, I started with a very tiny alpha, probably alpha 40. No, actually got even smaller. So let's see, 42, not quite 43, probably 43, something like that. Let's see how it works in here if I use 43. Yeah, so let's see, a little bit more intensity, and probably like 43, let's see, 44. Yeah, more like 44. If I can actually crank the alpha here a little bit more, a little sharper, or I can switch, let's see, 45 looks sharper. I thought it was a little bit sharper than that. Maybe I'm using something higher. 46 is getting smaller, 47. Yeah, 47, so 47. So probably this is the alpha I'm using. So I'm using alpha 47 with the spray. Color, again, I don't need variation here. So I'm gonna be like, placement is 0.5, flow 0.25, which is the default, right? But if you want things to be more spread out, you can always bring it all the way to 0, and you get more spread out like that, right? So I use this brush here a lot to create the stubble. And it's a combination. Normally, like I paint the stubble and the sculpt at the same time. But because I'm using the stubble already, like the hair X-Gen to create the stubble itself, I normally paint the reverse. So I create like little dots, you know, it's like little pores, not pores, but I mean like it goes in. It doesn't match, for example, like the X-Gen hair that I have. So it's kind of like it's a combination of impressions in there, but it's not something super precise, you know. There are ways you can actually try to create this this perfect effect, and I did this for my what's the model I was working before, Dick Smith, right? The Dick Smith model. What I did with it, once I had all the X-Gen in place for the, actually it was Rick Baker that I did that. Once I had the entire X-Gen in place, like for hair and for the beard and all that stuff, in Arnold, there's a way for you to bake the maps, right? So for example, like you can render to bake a map, just like I showed you the other day, like Arnold utilities, and you can say bake selected geometry, right? And they can say, no, that's not geometry. It's like, let's see, texture manager, convert shaders, import, export. No, I think it is bake geometry. Let's see. So this one, utilities, it's been a while. So actually render selection to texture, sorry. So this one. So the way this works, basically, you're gonna put your output folder, the resolution you want, right? If you want an anti-alias or whatever you want. And basically like it's gonna render any shader that's assigned to your model with all the lighting that's in the scene, right? But let's say if you go to your Arnold shaders, and you simply assign the ambient occlusion shader to your whole model and hair. So for example, like later on, if you have like hair, beard, everything, you can assign the same shader, AI ambient occlusion, to everything, like the face and everything that's involved in the scene, right? And you can render that to texture. So what's gonna happen is that the model itself, when you select the geometry, the ambient occlusion that's gonna come from the hair itself, from XGen, is gonna be baked into the model. So if you tweak the ambient occlusion, for example, if I click the shader here, you see like I have like the spread, how much it's gonna spread out, the fall off, and all this stuff. If you do a few tests, you can actually manage to make the shadow that's gonna be the contact shadow between the beard or the hair and the skin very, very tiny, right? Another way to help with that is if you go to your XGen, later we're gonna be talking about this, you can make the root of XGen like smaller, so like very, very thin. And then when you render things, it bakes a tiny little dot that's basically like placed perfectly where each one of those hairs are. So that little dot you can use as a map to do a lot of cool things. For example, like if you want to create the impression that the hair is going inside of the skin, you can blur it out, right? So you're gonna get those little dots a little bit more blurred, or you can bake a little bit more blurred from here as well. And then you can actually use that, multiply it to your color, like to your subsurface scattering, for example, and you're gonna get that impression that all the hairs are a little bit ingrown, you know, kind of like going inside of the skin. It has a little bit of this dark, blurry thing in there. So with that in mind, I mean, like you can definitely do it. For example, if you put the entire stubble in place, you know, it's like in XGen, and you have very tiny little pieces of hair in there, you can use them to generate a little shadow, like a map that's black and white, just like completely white with the little dots matching each one of the stubble. And then you can use that to actually mix with the color map, and then you're gonna get a precise you know, placement for each one of them. But in my case here, I'm actually doing a combination. I'm considering like that the stubble is just one of the layers, right? Some of them are gonna have a little bit of length because you just like shaved or something. But some of them are gonna take longer to grow, right? Just like what happens with our beard. I'm not talking about the ladies now, unless you guys are Portuguese. No, I'm just kidding. My ex-wife was Portuguese, and we used to joke about the mustaches. I'm just kidding. It's so mean. But yeah, for example, like if I have like the stubble in a certain length, I can consider that a lot of the hair is actually not growing that much and that at the same rate, right? So you're gonna get a lot of ingrowns still there. And then those are gonna be just like dark in the skin, but they're not gonna show up. So that's basically what I'm gonna be doing here. As an example, what I mean, because it's very easy to talk and not show examples, let's just show this one here. That's the Rick Baker one. And then let me show you what I mean. See if I can find like the older stuff. This one. Well, this is a combination, right? You can see that I have the stubble itself right there, right? Like the hairs are kind of like a little spread out, but I also have the paint underneath it. So you can see like some stuff, it looks like it was shaved, right? Like so you get some of them are a little bit more blurry than others. But at this point here, I still didn't have like a, you know, it's like this, how like, yeah, the little pass with the ambient occlusion is not present in this one here, but it is, I think, in the final one. So if I look at the hairline, for example, I think this one had it. Maybe I blurred it a lot, or maybe I removed it, but I swear I had, like for each one of the hairs, I had a little bit of a dot in there. Maybe I removed at the end, but just so you know, it's possible, you know, it's like it takes time to render it, but you can definitely get like one little dot baked into the color map or the, you know, an additional map you want to use that matches each one of the hairs in the entire system. So you can do that for beard or for hair or for everything at the same time if you want to, just so you know it's a possibility. But again, going back to ZBrush, we're going to be painting some stubble here, which is like, again, it's not like the perfect amount of matching stubbles, but it's something that's going to give a nice impression. So if I have like a dark tone, for example, I'm not going to go black, but I'm going to go like very dark gray around here. And for intensity, I can go actually a little bit darker than that, closer to black, and then a low intensity. So let's see what we get here. I'm gonna do like in the mirror. So I'm gonna get like one layer is gonna be a little subtle, and a little spread out like that. And then the next one I'm gonna do, it's a little bit sharper and a little bit more on the surface. Following the same philosophy, right? Like you start with the bigger forms, always like with a lower intensity first, just to give the impression that things are coming from a deeper place, right? Like my thoughts and my experiences in life. And then from that point on, you're gonna introduce like a, you know, sharper detail. And so I broke the symmetry right here in the middle, right? I don't want those little dots to start like basically like overlapping each other. That would suck. So I'm gonna just do some more of that in here. And then underneath as well, I can keep going with this. I didn't put any color underneath the chin in there, but I could keep going with this all the way to the, you know, it's like to the neck area right here. I'm gonna break the symmetry here. And again, like they are a little bit strong for this first passing here, but I think for the example it's gonna work. So let's try some of that. And now I'm gonna switch to a smaller brush. So I'm gonna go smaller than this. I'm gonna crank the intensity to like 40 something. And I'm gonna do another pass. And I'm doing, like you can see in the video, my hands, I'm doing like circular motions, right? Never doing like straight lines. You wanna make sure that you move in circles, make sure that all those areas blend together. And then if it's just like one area that you need a little retouch in there, you can just go and paint it. You're gonna go around here and then again, break the symmetry, circle, circle, circle. In certain areas, you're gonna get more density, right? Like some people have very little hair on the sides of the face. And then when you get around the mustache, for example, you're gonna get a very, very dense amount of hairs. And for example, Latinos like myself and like the Native American I was sculpting the like last October, you know, it's like the tendency is to have a denser around like the mustache area. So we get a little bit more hairs in there. And then things are a little bit less dense around the rest, right? But in this case here, I'm actually building up pretty good around this entire area. And then it's a matter of like what type of pattern you're gonna go, right? Like, I mean, like people have different patterns for the beard. Mine goes pretty much like all the way up here if I leave it, but I have to shave this area. But for example, around here, I can keep building just with a little bit less intensity, just to have some of them in there. And then I can keep going with this in those little circles. Can even introduce a tiny little bit, a tint of blue, but almost like completely black, just a tiny little tint of blue in here. And then keep going a little bit further. The mustache. Using that little brush. Same for the area of the chin in here. Break symmetry again. Always in circles, and then covering up everything. Don't leave areas completely without anything, any hair. If you want to do a little bit of hair in an area, but your brush, your spray, you're already maxed out here, so the flow is already at 0. So it should be like the most spread out you can get, right? If you're not getting like just a little bit, if you need in one area, just use like very fast gestures with your hand. So you can do like this, right? Let me just do like a little bit less intense than that. Little fast motion like that. You're gonna see probably like when I post it in there, you're gonna see just a little bit of them introduced to that area. Same for this area around here. I'm gonna do fast motion like that, get some of them in place. Or you can also use this placement here instead of like 0.5. You can use like a very, very, let's see, I think is it the highest one? Yeah, the highest one actually adds more space between them. So you can use that as well a little bit. Probably gonna help a little bit. And then again, I can actually crank the intensity some more. Let's go to 50 now. And then make the brush smaller and then get some more in there. like that. Variation is very important for skin detail, you know. You want to make sure that things read random instead of like full of patterns, right? So keep playing with this, like for sculpting, like pores detail, wrinkle detail, color detail, anything, you know. It's like you start with like small intensity, bigger forms, and then higher intensity, smaller forms, and then you're gonna get a lot of cool variation, you know. Let me save this very fast so you can see what I did so far, so I can follow in there. You're gonna see like it's a very, very thin type of detail, which is really cool for, you know, it's like at this point here, I can actually go bigger with my brush. Let's see, I'm using 47. Let's go to maybe like 44. And then I'm gonna go with the lower intensity again because it's a bigger form. And just gonna make like a little bit like overall more gray. So let's see, not like that. I got some of the lips as well. I think it's because of the placement. Let's just bring the placement back to default, which is 0.5 here. Oh, let's do like an average like that. And then maybe a little bit too strong. Let's get intensity lower, 15. Yeah, that should work. So back and forth between like scale and adding more variation, right? So I'm just gonna save this one so you can see it on your end. So let's see, yeah, one of those, and then the other one is gonna be the cheeks area. So export, body paint 2. And then let's see if I get the, let's see if I can get like the veins I just sculpted in there to around the eyes, right? The document, export, paint 3. I'm actually glad doing this because you can, at least like you're not gonna forget that fast the stuff I'm talking about. So it's kind of like you're gonna get a little bit of a faster scoop in there. So let's see, polypaint 2 and 3. You're gonna see like it's still fairly generic, but you're gonna be able to see some of the detail. It's like, it's basically from now on is doing more and more of what I was just doing with those brushes. So if you click those ones just posted in the chat, let's see if I can open on my end here. Let's see how it works. Does it open like that? Oh yeah. Oh, it's not opening the map itself. It's just like pointing here to the folders. But you guys can open your end, right? Can you open the files? Just test it in there and let me know.
Yeah, I can open it.
Okay, cool.
Yep.
Yeah, awesome. So yeah, like this brush can really help, you know. It's like, once this is applied with the color itself, a lot of the stuff's gonna get a little bit softer, and but whatever is black in there is gonna definitely show in the texture. Now, if I'm painting this stuff like, you know, it's like over and over again, doing all those color tones and looking at the references and everything, right? You're gonna see like if you look at the images in there around this area here, there's a couple of different things that I use, right? So I use like some of the overall tones, like a little bit of greens around, you know, it's like close to the corner of the eye in here. There's some yellow, orange around here, some more redness around here, and then micro veins is smaller and more intense. And then the bigger ones, a little bit more faded. Some of them are, you know, it's like more visible than I would like to, but it's there. And then for the beard, this is going to be covered with the muzzle itself later. If you're sculpting a female, you don't need to worry about it, right? But it's a cool little feature for this kind of character. And then for the most part, like the technique's going to be all the same. It's a matter of like starting with the spray brush, like actually starting with the blocking the colors, overall colors, and then coming with the spray brush, go with the darker tones first to start blocking like the darker stuff for around the eyes, lips, you know, it's like inside of the nose, ears, and then you start introducing some more spray to get like the lighter areas, right? Like you're gonna get like those areas underneath the eyebrows, then around the eyes. Gonna try to find the cartilage area around the nose in here, and then around this, you know, the edges of the lips and things like that. And then slowly you're gonna start building up all those forms. You know, it's like starting always the same way with you know, a broader kind of broader brushes, like with less intensity, and then going further with the smaller ones with more intensity. But what's going to really pull this entire thing together is the amount of variations you're going to introduce to it. So for example, like those little marks that I added in there manually, right? Those little dots and pimples and things like that. This is going to really bring things into a more like realistic feel, combined with a little bit of a lighter tone assigned on the top of it, everything. So for example, I'm gonna save this one. I'm gonna just do a quick pass in here for you to see what I mean. Like this little pass I mentioned before, that's kind of like a very pale yellow, almost white. And then I'm gonna do a little bit of, let's get my color poly painting here. And maybe, yeah, I can keep this one, this little alpha in there I mentioned before. And let's see if the intensity at 3 is okay. So I'm gonna just add this pale color around here on the cheeks area. So remember, like I added some like overall redness to it, right? So I'm gonna paint some whites to cover that redness now. Not white, but I mean like really pale yellow, almost white. So this, if I start adding them everywhere, you're gonna see like it's almost like, you know, when it's a cold day and you look at your skin and you have like some redness, but also some whitish dots everywhere. So that's basically the effect we are going to create here. This adds a lot of life to the skin. Let me save like probably like the last little screenshot here, so you guys, we don't spend too much time doing this back and forth. But at the end, I mean, like I'm going to be posting this for you guys to see as a reference. But I mean, like all this stuff here was done during the class, like from scratch, right? So it's not like something that's going to be done at all, but it's just like a reference using the exact same brushes that I always use to paint this stuff. You know, it's like everything is manual labor. There's no secret other than just spending time. You know, it's just like I mentioned before, like get the best music you can find and just like, you know, sit your butt and then do a lot of the same stuff. Use the similar brushes and experiment with some new ones, you know, create some new ones. But for this stuff, let me just show you the last one here. Export Poly Paint 3. And then from here, let's try to shift this back to dark and export a few maps and maybe do a little quick test just to see how it looks like. Because like I said, like easy to talk and without testing, right? So you don't know exactly if it's gonna work or not. So let's see, this guy, did I save it as 4? Oh, there you go. Okay, so this is the last one I'm gonna post here in the chat. Polypaint 4. So this one is just for you to see the pale little dots that I added to the cheeks. Can you see the difference in there? Like if you look towards this area here in the edge, it's completely plain, right? It's just like a single color. But as soon as you get closer to the cheek in here, now there's more complexity. There's a bunch of passes in here that we did together in there. So like the reds with spray and then the whites with spray on top really add to it. It adds this little, you know, it's almost like 3-dimensional in a way, you know. It really mixes and brings things together. So yeah, so let's shift this color here now that we have it. So if you don't want to destroy the entire thing here, right? Like it's a little blotchy, you know, it's like there's some colors that I have to refine. And to refine, I mean, like if I keep doing the same thing, for example, like adding more of this blending of the lighter tones on top of the darker tones, I might actually be able to actually level the entire thing. Instead of like having those very different colors, everything starts getting a little bit more similar by just blending things together, right? So let's just do this. Let's get out of HD. And what's the procedure to actually import HD or export HD color? Exactly the same way you export your displacement maps. There is no difference whatsoever. So let me just duplicate this model again, because I want to make sure that I have a backup, right, of this color, so it's saved in there. But I want to keep like the HD. That's the one we're going to be using to export everything. So in this case here, because we are not exporting the displacement map, it's just the color is going to be very fast. But to make sure that you're exporting the right thing with the right UVs, let's make sure that we have the right UVs first. So let's get the import this, the latest one I exported yesterday, base mesh. So it's going to be like low res 26. So now I know we have the right UVs. And then I don't need to switch morph target or anything like that because it's just color that we want, right? I normally do this, but you don't need to. I believe he already cranks all the way to 100 by default, but I crank like the RGB intensity to 100 before I export everything. So multi-map exporter, displacement, I'm gonna turn it off. Texture from point paint, 8K, and that's it. No switch morph target, I don't need that. So let's just give a name to it. Let's just name this subtool here, just like, let's see, live paint. And then let's export this. Should take just a few seconds. I'm gonna export always inside of source images. livepaint.tiff, okay? It's gonna do some calculation in there. And let's see how it looks like with the pale skin under the same lighting setup. It might look like shit, but we're gonna know once we render it. So we're gonna have to plug our, just get this guy here, back to our, with the model selected, I can just go to graph in my hypershade and say graph materials and selected objects. So this is basically my current skin shader. Let's do a quick test just to make sure that we have the right thing. Let's see, Arnold render view right here. Let's render this. And then, meanwhile, we already probably have the maps. Let's see. Still exporting. I'm always afraid that I'm running too many things at the same time, but it should handle. I mean, I never had this problem. I was like in months teaching those classes of, you know, ZBrush crashing. I had Maya crashes for sure, but not ZBrush. I think I might have maybe like 1 or 2 crashes in like since May of last year. But this is kind of like unusual to have like 2 crashes in a week or a few days. So let's see. Okay, should be almost done.
Chris?
Yes.
I find that I always get the output error happening whenever I export, or like 2 out of 3 times. Say.
Oh, really?
I'm not sure whether I'm using 2019. I don't know if that's worse or better than
how much memory do you have?
On this one, I think I've got 64.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, 64 should be able to handle it.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Strange. I don't know why it's doing it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, but you're aware that you should not save if you get that error, right? Like, I mean, like you definitely, the file is corrupted at that point.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I got like a list of processes to do each time, so just save it before exporting.
Oh yeah, man. Same with me. That's the thing, you know. It's like you have to learn how to walk around all those bugs, right? Like it's kind of like it's like a minefield.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like it's cool that we learn those things, and sometimes we exchange experiences online, and people are aware. But at the same time, I mean, the developers should be more aware of this stuff too, you know. So this is basically the rendering right now, but we're not going to finish this render because that's exactly the render we had yesterday. This one here, right? Once it finishes, it should look like this. Actually, not quite like this, but more like this. This is the without the effects. And this one is the color corrected using the alien skin one. So no correction and with correction. Very little correction, right? Just a little bit. So let's stop it and then let's plug the new maps in here. So click the model, dark skin. I'm gonna go to my subsurface. Click this one here. And let's get the new maps that we just exported. So live paint. So you should have like a pale skin now. Already have the 5 tiles loaded because I kept the UDIM. Already converted everything to sRGB texture. So let's just save as a reference this one, store snapshot. And let's get the albino version now. If it's too slow, maybe it's just concentrate in one area, like maybe like the cheek, and get a little bit of the stubble in here. The skin looks a little bit too pale as well, so I could go a little bit lower in intensity. Let's see if we can see anything.
Hey, Chris.
Yes.
How are you?
Hi.
Hi.
How you doing, man?
Fine. I have a little question about HD.
Uh-huh.
If you have, let's say, three levels of HD, and you decided at some point you have to remove one of them, is there a way to do that? Or,
oh man, unfortunately you don't. Yeah, HD is so limited. You know, it's like the when I did the reviews over the weekend. I think it was Oliver. He had like one subdivision level more than what he should have. I think he had like 400 million polygons in there. And then the only way for me to remove is to basically like go back to the highest resolution before HD, and then create a copy of it, and then subdivide it again. You know, I was like, there's no way to simply disconnect it. Now, if you have like the detail always sculpted and everything, and you don't want to lose any of that stuff, then you can always go to, for example, like you go to your HD geometry, and then you go to a subdivision level before the highest, right? So basically, like that's the resolution you want from that point on, right? So go like one subdivision level less, and then you select a chunk, just like I did to demonstrate today. Select a chunk of it, and then create a polygroup, crease it, and then export. So we can export like a bunch of those groups, and then you're gonna have like a model with all the textures like in there for you. So you can save those as subtools of the model you have, and then create the subdivision levels again, all the way to the subdivision level before the last one, and then go HD on that model at the highest, and then you can start projecting things from those subtools. You know, you can do selectively. So for example, like paint a mask, project just from that specific chunk, go to the next chunk, paint another mask, and keep doing that until we recover all the detail, you know, because you don't want to lose all the detail if you have like, if you're very advanced with everything. But you know, let me get this exposure down here. It looks like
thank you, Chris.
Yeah, no problem. So yeah, it's like, this is the pale skin right there, right? It looks a little bit, I had to actually reduce the exposure here a little bit because it got a little bit overblown. I think my light might be overblown. I have to double check against my my white sphere in there, not white sphere, but the gray one. But it seems like it might be a little overblown. It was like at 0 here, and it was looking just like that. I mean, the render looks great, but either the skin is too pale, or I think the lighting is actually overblown a little bit. So, but that's basically like the map we just painted in there. So you're gonna see like it's very, very subtle when it comes like to the, you know, it's like to the stubble that we did. If I do like that, you can actually see it, right? But then the procedure from this point on, once you have, let's say like if you want to tweak the color, right? Like if everything's a little bit too pale, you're gonna do the same procedure I was talking about before, which is like go to your flat color so you can see it. And then you can just like, not in the HD geometry version of it, right? You're gonna go like the highest level before HD. You can go to your poly paint, or you can do by chunk too if you want to do by polygroups. But you can go to your poly paint, right? Where is it? Right here. And then you can adjust your color. Again, like you can do like your HSV intensity lower. And then maybe a little bit lower and more contrasty like that. So this skin color here probably gonna behave a little bit better. I think I'm too pale in the whole thing. I would have to go darker and darker and darker until I get a better result in there. So yeah, I think like around here, it should be like a good balance. Now, the other way to do this, if you wanna control this, it's like in my past tutorials, if you went through the videos and if you already did some of the tutorials, you notice that I use a couple of like color corrective nodes. So take a look at how I'm doing this. You know, it's like there are like 2 nodes I use normally in Maya, and you can plug them in between your texture and in those nodes, and then you can have like control for adjustments. You know, it's like you can bring the whole intensity down. You can shift some tones, for example. What I do with when I paint like a lighter skin like this, I tend to actually desaturate the reds and saturate and add more blue to it. And the whole purpose of that is because if you're painting the skin just like you're seeing it, so you're looking at the reference of a picture, right? And you're painting what you're seeing there, you're actually painting more than you should be painting, because you're not taking into account that there's subsurface scattering baked into that texture, right? So when you're painting, it looks like reddish than it is, because there's subsurface underneath it. So basically like the lighting is reflecting underneath the skin and creating that redness. So if you're able to actually remove all the blood that's flowing under the skin, you would have a very pale kind of skin. So what I try to emulate normally when I have those maps plugged, I plug like this, I can show like the next, tomorrow I can show you very quickly if you didn't see in the past courses yet. But basically like you can plug one of those color corrective nodes, and then you can just like reduce the intensity of the red, and then crank a little bit the green and the blue, like basically like reverse the curves, right? Less red, tiny, kind of like the green stays in the same spot, and then more blue. So kind of like bring the curves a little bit closer. And that introduces a little bit of a coldness to the skin, which is basically compensated with the subsurface scattering, bringing it back to, you know, to a more natural kind of tone. So basically like you turn things a little bit bluish, but the subsurface scattering brings it back to what you're seeing in the references, you know. So it's a little trick in there, but I can show you guys tomorrow that, you know. But overall, painting the skin is a lot of those techniques I show you guys, like lots of noise, and then just observing, you know, it's like observing the references. If you pick something in the reference that looks, let's see if I have it here, right? Like you have so many interesting colors in here, like around the nose in here. This is going to get like very, very purplish around there, and then magenta, right? And then lots of those veins around the nose in here. Lots of like yellow green around those eye bags, some bluish in there as well. Lots of those little veins on top of the eyes. So instead of like just having a plain darker color around the eyes, a lot of those colors are coming from like those dark blood vessels in there, right? So a lot of that. And yeah, like you're gonna observe like there are like tones like here, you're gonna see there's a little bit of yellow and green as well. Obviously there's contamination from the environment, right? So you never know exactly what's happening here, but he might have like some greenish stuff happening in the background as well, right? But if you look at the of a face of the same guy, for example, other different lighting situations, some of the stuff sticks, you know. It's like in kind of like even like under like a neutral light like this one, which is like a flashlight, probably like a large soft box, right? You still see some of the greens and yellows around there. So some of those basically like, okay, that's the color that I should add, right? But the best way to observe the color itself is under like a basically like daylight calibrated light, right? So in this case here, it's not quite the soft box because the shadow underneath his nose looks very sharp, but it's definitely like a flashlight. And flashlights are normally calibrated like 6,500 Kelvin or 6,000. So it's basically like a daylight, so not a lot of contamination, right? And because it's so strong in here, the flash is like exposing pretty good. So it's pretty much like killing a little bit of the exposure that's coming from other colors contaminating from the environment. So you kind of like, you can kind of trust what's going on in there. So those tones we looked before, they're still there, you know. It's like a little bit of more green in there, a little bit of yellow. Same for here, right? Like some blues, some, you know, it's like a dark reds and then some purples. Yeah. Every time you have like the thin skin and folds like that and areas with the fat underneath, you can definitely go with a little bit of like a pale yellow and with a little tint of green, you know, just to simulate the underneath structures, like all the fat pads and all that stuff. But yeah.
Chris?
Yeah.
I haven't seen you using the smooth for smoothing the colors. And I'm having some trouble because as soon as I smooth and then I go to higher subdivision levels, it gets me this kind of gasoline mix. It cranks the colors a lot. I don't know if you had the same problem.
You know, it's like the thing that's funny about that is that I used to have this all the time. So, for example, like I would go, for example, like out of HD, and I would smooth everything. And then when I would go to HD, everything was kind of like destroyed, right? Like my detail was not there anymore. Like, you know, it's like all the fine stuff I had was kind of like all messed up. But then I tested after that, you know, it's like a friend of mine who used to work at ILM. He said like, no, I don't have that problem. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to test in the next model. In the next model I tested and it was totally fine. I could go back and forth. So I'm basically like smoothing stuff in the lowest level and not having that problem. But I know that it happened to me before. So I don't know if it's dependent on whatever it is, man. It's one of those bugs, you know?
It's a random thing, right? Because I did it before, but on this model is suddenly, so I didn't know if it was a problem from the 2020 or it's just model based.
No, this was like when I had this problem was like years ago, you know, it's like it was an old version and I already had that problem. And if you're saying it's happening now, I'm going to tell you that I'm totally familiar with the problem. You know, it's just like I didn't know it still happened.
Well, then I smooth painting on top. I think that's it.
Yeah, or when you're smoothing stuff, maybe try to use the smooth strong, and then just do the smoothing inside of HD, and you should have no problem. I think.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, I think it's always like there is a problem, including someone complained about this the other day, and I know it happens as well. So, for example, like you did all your HD geometry detail, and it looks really good, and the depth looks good and everything. But then when you went outside of HD geometry, you're gonna notice that the surface now is all like a little noisy, right? And some people, okay, like it looks noisy. That bothers me, so I'm gonna just smooth it out a little bit. So they smooth it out, and then when you go back to HD, now that little simple smooth affected all the forms. So the pores are not as deep anymore. It loses a lot of the stuff that was sculpted in HD. So I would say like I know that the transition between non-HD and HD is not perfect at all. So one kind of like affects the other one in a weird way. For example, you sculpt stuff like sometimes very subtle in HD, and then when it shows in non-HD, it looks much deeper than it looked when it was HD, and vice versa. Sometimes you smooth something in non-HD, and when you go in HD, like it looks bigger. It's weird. There's a disconnect between one and the other. I think I'm not sure how it works exactly, the technical part of things, but I think like once you go HD, everything is like reading from those virtual maps. Everything is saved as some kind of like a proprietary format or whatever. So it loads those maps on the fly and then shows you in HD, right? And then saves it back. So it keeps like iterating on those same maps all the time. So I think like when you switch to non-HD, because it's pure geometry at that point, I don't know if there's some disconnect, you know, it's not perfect at all. It's the kind of stuff like we have to talk to a fair, you know, and see if he can do something about that, because it's definitely not perfect. So I think this happens for both the sculpting part and the poly paint part, you know. So from this point on, I'm going to say like the best way for you guys to trust what's going to happen is if you do all the smoothing and all the, you know, whatever you need to do changes inside of HD, and then leave like the non-HD part. Just like for, you know, it's like secondary forms, you can actually still sculpt secondary forms in there, like the bigger forms. Primary forms change as much as you need, as long as it's not huge changes, right, to stretch. But anything that's like within the tertiary forms and polypaint, try to do it within HD. Otherwise, you might get into trouble, you know.
I see. Okay, thank you.
No problem. All right, guys, I think that's it for today. And then I hope it was okay to understand, you know, it's like what's going on here. Hard to see, right? But I mean, like I cannot get like a full-on finished skin just with one of those sessions. But you can see like a little bit of what's the intention here, right? Like you know, to add some more variation and stuff. But I definitely would have to plug for this pale skin here. Corrective node just to make things a little bit darker, a little bit more blue and less red. And then, but that would be just like for the pale skin. For the darker skin, this one here, I didn't have to do that, right? So let me go back to my exposure 0 here. It was working pretty good, like without having to add those maps. So yeah, so I still can use him, you know. It's like I can use like a corrective just in case if I want to bring this more towards like a blue or something like that. But I really like the warm tones in him, you know. Now, when I posted on Instagram last night, I actually used one of those Instagram filters, is the second one, and then that was applied on top of this one, and it really punched some of the colors pretty nicely, you know. It's like it got a little bit more blue, and I like the way it looked in there. So it's not quite the one-to-one of what you're seeing here. In the Instagram, it has like one of those Instagram filters in there, but all right, guys. So tomorrow it's going to be an important day because we're going to be talking about eyes, and eyes are what make everything look alive, right? Like once the eyes are good, we really like, you know, it's like you get the eyes to look correct. Basically, like everything goes around the eyes, right? Like it's a matter of like finding the right balance between how dark the eyes have to be, like the scleras, and let's see, for example, like this guy. Oh, those are like some tests that I did. So for example, like the eyes here, if you go too white with them, it doesn't quite work for this character. So I had to go a little bit more gray. Sometimes you can get some redness, right? But then if you go too crazy with redness, it looks like the person is just smoked pot, you know. It's like you're gonna get like too red. So I like having like some kind of like an in-between tone in there. And this one, I think is just, if I show you this, just as a comparison here. So this is basically like the HDR that I plugged last night, right before, right after the class. I plugged a different HDRI. So that's the one I'm using here in comparison to the one I did previously. So I think this one has a little bit more drama. So this is the one I'm gonna use from now on. And then just as a record here, that's the one I'm using right here, is also from HDRI Haven. It's called Woods. Easy to find. Just type Woods in the search box in there, and I got the 4K one. Just make sure that when you plug the map, you match the same resolution in here, right? So 4K, just put 496 in there, and it should be good to go. All right, guys, thank you so much, and then let's make some eyes tomorrow.
Have a good night.
You too, guys. Thank you.